Now, the figures are quite startling if you take a look at this curbing transmission, the community transmission in particular. We've taken those figures earlier on. Let me just go straight and introduce the president or the chairman of the Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria, Dr. Olufunlayo. Thank you so much once again for coming in.
Thank you.
The figures are scary. I mean, if you take the comparison between April 1 and 29, 900% increase.
Yes.
And this is the time we're easing up a bit. Virtually every state in the Federation, I believe, as at this morning, there was only one state that hadn't received a confirmed COVID case now. Do you think we will be able to sustain any momentum we may have gained from the last 4 weeks or thereabouts of the lockdown when we ease the lockdown and allow people to move around?
Okay. Thank you very much. There are several things to be considered right now. Really, we are in a very tricky and precarious situation because being a developing country with a lot of people below the poverty line, daily earners and so on, all these factors that we have listed over and over again, it's difficult to keep the country in lockdown for a long period of time. Besides, when the lockdown first occurred, there were quite a number of challenges. We didn't start testing large numbers on time, so we didn't get a very true picture of what we had early enough. Secondly, palliatives that were distributed initially were not getting to the most vulnerable. So a lot of people have been groaning and wailing. And while the truth is that, the fact is that really right now we are just beginning to see a steep rise in the curve. The government may have decided to do this now because they're also thinking of the health of the economy. So the point really is that no matter when we decide to ease the lockdown, what is important is for us to be able to balance public health measures that will sustain social distancing, okay, with issues that pertain to the economy. And also the gradual easing shouldn't be rushed. If it is rushed, then any mistakes that are made will not be easily reversed. So we should look at it very carefully. We have decided this is the way we're going now. We need to really look at, we don't want a situation where on Monday in the nation's commercial capital, for example, you have the streets filled with cars and then people are not even able to get home. So we should have only a few, a small proportion of workers back on the roads, and those should be the most essential. So I think it really needs to be well thought out and implemented if we are going to be able to maintain the balance. And I must say that definitely there will still be an increase in cases because when you let people out, no matter how few, there's going to be some contact. But it's important how we manage that. And we could do a good job if we put our minds to it and put all the structures and machinery that are available deployed.
The most vulnerable group, the group with the most infections, has moved from the 51 to 60 group at the start of April to the 31 to 40 group. Does that surprise you, one? Does it give you any element of fear, particularly considering the fact that the 51 to 60 group are but a very small percentage of the numbers you'll be talking about in the 31 to 40 group?
Well, there could be several reasons for that. Remember that the demographics, the characteristics of the infection are changing. When we started, we had a large proportion. Of course, we started with travel history. Then we went on to the contacts or local transmission we could identify. At this point in time, 50% of all confirmed cases have no epidemiological link, which means that it's most likely that they contacted it from other sources, from the community. So we can't link it to anybody. So now we are leaving the very high risk to groups that we consider to be slightly lower risk. But remember that these groups are the more mobile groups than the elderly. So this may be one of the gains, in a sense, of the lockdown, because during the lockdown, we seriously emphasized that the elderly were vulnerable
And that they shouldn't move.
they shouldn't move, they should protect themselves. So maybe some ambitious or very, energetic younger people are the ones now going out and contracting it. So these may be some of the reasons that explain the change in the age group that is now most preponderantly affected.
If we take a look at it going forward and we look at, as you said, we just seem to now be ascending the curve. Some of the countries that have ascended that curve say they are reaching the peak and that after now it can only go down. In our case, we are just getting onto that. And I want to go back to the issue that you mentioned earlier, which is the balance between the health of the citizenry and the health of the economy. If there are active citizens who are healthy, then the economy can go on. But if there aren't, then of course the economy will still suffer regardless of whether or not it is open. What are we to do now? Particularly because the other group that is now seemingly affected are health workers. It was startling to hear the health minister admit that no, it wasn't 300 health workers who were affected, but it was 113. 113 out of a number that is already inadequate is quite important. What are we to do now that people are going to move around more freely and therefore there might be more cases? What are we going to do so that they don't get swamped? Or you don't get swamped since you're one of them?
Yes. Really, there's so many. We have to have a responsive system. The health system, the system at large has to be responsive, which means we have to keep on looking at the data and we have to keep on making adjustments as we see need. Of course, secondly, I had already said that we need to manage the easing of the lockdown very carefully. We must strengthen our public health measures. And like was said by your correspondent in Abuja, you can see that if we engage the communities, they can actually understand what we're talking about. But I don't think enough has been done. We need to use all structures available to us to reach out to our communities and let them understand what this infection is about so that they can take ownership. The NCDC has this campaign, #TakeResponsibility. Every individual needs to take that responsibility and say, no, I don't want to go close to somebody else, or I don't want to go out if it's not absolutely necessary, and so on and so forth. I must, maintain hand hygiene. So these things are very, very important. And then we're looking at, the capacity we have for admissions. It's being discussed that, we might be looking at different strategies for...
Yes, because the NCDC surprisingly talked about Lagos in particular.
Oh, yes.
Having a struggle with beds now.
Yes, definitely.
Of course, 931 cases, I mean, if you subtract those who have been discharged, that's still quite a number, about 700.
Yes.
That means active cases are being treated now. That's quite a...
The Honorable Commissioner for Health, I remember in a briefing, I think at the weekend, did say that we're almost at the, top, we've almost filled the capacity that we have in the state. So we also need to be thinking about different strategies for managing cases of COVID-19 going forward. And I remember that the NCDC boss did allude to that today in his speech, that we're still trying to manage and look for space, but we would also think of other means so that we don't get to a situation where we get overwhelmed. But I must say, health workers' welfare must be quickly looked into. Generally speaking, personal protective equipment are still not readily available. And we know why. They're not available worldwide. But we need to get them. We need to devise means. We also need to streamline our operations in the various facilities so that we do not have people being unduly exposed. I must tell you that some of our health workers that got exposed to COVID-19 got exposed to doing active case surveillance, not just treating patients in the hospitals. So the exposure is everywhere. And, we just need to ensure that we get to have the minimum requirements whenever we see a patient, because every patient right now is suspected COVID until proven otherwise.
Going forward, you've talked about how this needs to be carefully managed. It's broken down currently into 6 weeks, two weeks, 3-week tranches, and then at the end of the period, of each period, a review is done. If you were to mention three things that they should be looking out for at the end of the first 2 weeks, what would those be?
Well, definitely the increase in the number of confirmed cases, the increase in the number of deaths, and of course the number of testings that are being done. Like I said earlier, we must really ramp up testings, especially in places where hitherto testing was a problem, because those could just be a can of worms waiting to explode. So we need, if we know what is going on, we have an idea of the transmission in each area, we can deploy strategies to mitigate transmission.
Indeed. Dr. Tolu Olufunlayo, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Olufunlayo is the president or the chairman of the Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria. Maybe they'll change that title because of this COVID-19. Thank you so much for your time.